There are moments in a nation's journey when silence becomes dangerous, when the winds around us whisper truths we have long ignored. Today, I stand before you not as a man of titles, but as a humble witness to a reality our hearts can no longer escape. There comes a time when God does not shout, but He warns. Through the trembling of our societies, through the unrest in our spirits, through the quiet cry of the oppressed. And if we are wise, we will listen. For a divine warning is not a strike of fear, but a call to awaken, a call to rise, a call to reclaim the humanity we have allowed to slip through our fingers. My friends, this is such a time. We can no longer walk blindly through a world that demands our courage. We must confront what we have become, and more importantly, what we still have the power to be. A warning from God is not a threat, but a reminder, a quiet voice rising above the noise of our daily lives, calling us to awaken the conscience buried within each of us. It is in the nature of human beings to forget their purpose when the road becomes comfortable, when the world distracts them with illusions of power, wealth, and control. But God does not abandon those who lose their way. Instead, He sends moments, sometimes gentle, sometimes fierce, that urge us to pause and reflect on the direction of our lives. These moments are not punishments. They are opportunities to return to the path of justice, compassion, and truth. When we encounter hardship, we often question why the world seems to turn against us. But every challenge carries a message. Rise above your weaknesses, correct your actions, and strengthen your character. A warning from God is not meant to break the spirit, it is meant to cleanse it. It is an invitation to step out of darkness and into clarity, to recognize the impact of our choices, not only on ourselves, but on those who walk beside us. God's reminders echo in the way we treat the vulnerable, in the way we speak to the forgotten, in the way we respond to injustice when it crosses our path. In a world divided by conflict and fear, divine warnings urge us to reclaim our unity. No nation can rise when its people walk in opposite directions, and no humanity can thrive when compassion is replaced with indifference. God calls us to stand together, to lift each other from despair, and to understand that freedom holds no meaning without moral responsibility. We cannot build a future of peace if we ignore the consequences of our actions. The world trembles not because it is evil, but because good people often remain silent when their voices are needed most. Adversity shapes the soul. It reminds us that we cannot remain asleep while injustice grows, nor can we turn away from the suffering of others and expect our own lives to remain untouched. God speaks through storms as much as through calm seas. Sometimes He whispers through doubt, urging us to find courage. Other times He awakens the earth beneath our feet so that we may rise with new strength. His warnings are reminders that we are capable of more kindness, more integrity, more sacrifice for the greater good. Hope is never lost. A divine warning is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of transformation. It is an invitation to rebuild, to forgive, to walk the difficult path of righteousness even when the world chooses the easy path of ignorance. Leadership in such times requires courage and humility. It requires the strength to guide others toward the light, even when shadows loom large. Every generation receives its test, and ours is to restore compassion, justice, and peace to a world yearning for healing. Change begins not in grand gestures, but in the quiet decisions we make each day, for God's warnings speak first to the heart before. They shape the world around us. Humanity often forgets its purpose when life becomes too comfortable, when we are surrounded by distractions that pull our hearts away from what truly matters. We begin to believe that our achievements define us, that our possessions secure us, and that our power shields us. But in these moments of illusion, God sends gentle warnings to remind us of the path we were meant to walk. These warnings are not meant to frighten us, they are meant to awaken us. They remind us that there is a deeper meaning to our existence, a purpose far greater than personal gain or fleeting success. We forget our purpose when we chase after things that do not nourish the soul. We forget it when we allow our fears to silence our courage, or when we choose comfort over truth. In such moments, God whispers in our hearts, reminding us that we were created for compassion, for justice, for service to one another. He calls us back to the values that shape character, values that do not fade with time or crumble under pressure. These reminders are invitations to rise above the distractions and rediscover the strength of our moral compass. When a society turns away from its purpose, it begins to drift. It loses its unity, its empathy, its sense of shared destiny. And yet, even in such times, God does not abandon us. His warnings guide us toward righteousness, reminding humanity that we are interconnected, that our actions have consequences, and that we are responsible for the world we help create. Whether through moments of adversity or quiet reflection, these warnings urge us to correct our steps before the road becomes too dark to navigate. God's reminders often appear in the events that shake us. They come in the form of challenges that reveal our weaknesses and opportunities that reveal our potential. They teach us that life is not meant to be lived in ignorance or complacency. Instead, it is meant to be lived with intention, with an understanding that each day offers a chance to align ourselves with what is right. When we stray, these divine signs guide us back, showing us that righteousness is not merely a path, but a commitment to living with integrity and courage. Humanity's greatest power lies in its ability to change. No warning from God comes without hope. Each message invites us to rebuild our lives on foundations of kindness, humility, and justice. When we heed these warnings, we rediscover our purpose, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet choices we make to be better than we were yesterday. We remember that we are here to lift one another, to heal wounds, to speak for the voiceless, and to stand for what is right, even when the world demands silence. In remembering our purpose, we honor the divine guidance that watches over us. We rise not only for ourselves, but for the generations that will walk the path after us. For when humanity listens, when it returns to righteousness, it steps once again into the light it was always meant to follow. Every challenge that enters our lives arrives with a message, whether we recognize it in the moment or not. We often look at hardship as an enemy, as something designed to break us or push us into despair. Yet, in the quiet depth of struggle, God places lessons that cannot be learned in times of comfort. A challenge is not merely an obstacle, it is a reminder that growth requires resistance, that strength is forged in the fires of adversity, and that transformation demands courage. When difficulties come, they call us to rise above the limits we once accepted, to see ourselves not as victims of circumstance, but as students of a greater purpose. There are moments in our journey when life shakes us, not because we are weak, but because we have stayed still for too long. Challenges awake the sleeping parts of the soul, making us aware of paths we have ignored, truths we have avoided, and responsibilities we have postponed. They are invitations to reflect on where we stand and where we must go. Through each struggle, God asks us to examine our actions, our motives, and our relationship with justice. He reminds us that the path of righteousness is rarely the easiest road, but it is always the one that leads to meaning. When we face trials, we must understand that they are not only tests of endurance, but calls to correct our direction. Sometimes life blocks the route we are walking because it is not the road meant for us. Sometimes doors close because the destination behind them would diminish our character. And sometimes challenges appear because we have grown silent in the face of injustice, choosing convenience over courage. The divine message in hardship often asks, will you rise and do what is right even when the world urges you to remain still? Will you hold your integrity when the easier choice is to surrender it? Choosing justice over convenience is one of humanity's greatest struggles. It is easy to compromise values when the cost of integrity feels heavy. It is tempting to remain neutral when truth demands action. But every challenge that confronts us is an opportunity to choose differently, to choose what elevates the soul instead of what comforts it. God's message in adversity reminds us that justice is not merely an idea. It is a way of life that requires sacrifice, courage, and a willingness to stand alone if necessary. And yet, with every challenge, there is hope. God does not send struggles to crush the spirit, but to reveal its depth. He allows hardship not to destroy us, but to prepare us for greater responsibilities, greater compassion, and greater strength. When we choose justice, when we rise after being knocked down, we step into the fullness of who we were created to be. We become examples for others, showing that adversity does not define us. Our response to it does. In every challenge lies a divine message. Rise, correct your path, and choose justice even when convenience calls your name. And when you answer that call with dignity, you become a light in a world desperate for courage. God's warning is, at its heart, an invitation to unity, a gentle but powerful reminder that humanity was never meant to walk divided. When the world trembles, when conflict rises, when storms of fear and distrust sweep through nations, these moments do not come to destroy us, but to awaken us to the truth we have long forgotten. We are stronger together. Unity is not simply a choice, it is a responsibility, a sacred obligation placed upon every soul. And when God warns us, He calls us to set aside the walls we have built, walls of pride, of prejudice, of anger, and to remember that we are one human family sharing the same fragile earth. In times of division, people often retreat into their own corners, protecting their opinions, defending their differences, and forgetting their shared humanity. Yet God's message urges us to move in the opposite direction, to step toward one another, to rely on one another, to uplift one another. He reminds us that division weakens the spirit of a nation, while unity strengthens the destiny of its people. It is in our togetherness that we find resilience, courage, and hope. For no community rises when its people exchange compassion for suspicion or replace cooperation with conflict. God's warning asks us to examine the ways we contribute to separation. It asks us whether we speak words that heal or words that wound, whether we help build bridges or strengthen barriers. Many of the struggles we face as societies do not come from the presence of evil, but from the absence of unity. When we choose division over dialogue, we allow fear to shape the future. When we hold on to hatred, we deny ourselves the peace we claim to seek. And when we fail to uplift others, we unknowingly dim the light within ourselves. Unity calls for humility, for the willingness to listen without judgment and to forgive without hesitation. It demands that we recognize the humanity in those who differ from us, understanding that diversity is not a threat but a gift. God does not warn us so we can retreat into isolation. He warns us so that we may come together with greater purpose and renewed compassion. In moments of crisis, unity becomes a lifeline that carries nations through despair and leads them toward healing. When we uplift one another, we honor the divine intention for humanity. A simple act of kindness, a word of encouragement, a gesture of support, these become seeds of hope planted in the hearts of others. And when those seeds grow, they inspire transformation far beyond our sight. Unity gives strength to the weary, courage to the fearful, and dignity to the forgotten. It reminds us that no person is too small to make a difference, and no community too broken to be restored. God's warning is therefore not a signal of destruction, but a call to rise together. It asks us to reject division, to embrace unity, and to stand as one people bound by compassion and justice. When we answer this call, we help build a world where every individual is lifted, every voice is valued, and every heart finds its place in the human family. There comes a moment in every life when a person must stand before the truth of their own actions. It is easy to look outward, to blame circumstances, to point to the failures of others. But true freedom, freedom of the soul, freedom of the spirit, can never be achieved without moral responsibility. God's warning calls us not only to see the world clear, but to see ourselves clearly. It asks us to confront the choices we have made, the silence we have allowed, and the paths we have walked even when we knew they were not aligned with righteousness. We often move through life believing that our intentions excuse our actions, or that our excuses can absolve us from accountability. But the divine message reminds us that intention alone is not enough. It must be matched with integrity. For a person who avoids responsibility cannot grow, and a nation that refuses to confront its own errors cannot rise. When we face our actions honestly, without fear, without denial, we open the door to transformation. We acknowledge our humanity, our imperfections, and our capacity to change. This acknowledgement is not weakness, it is the foundation of wisdom. There is dignity in admitting when we have gone astray. There is strength in recognizing the harm we have caused through neglect or indifference. Too often, people believe that confronting their own actions will diminish them, when in truth, it expands them. It allows them to step into a higher purpose, to rebuild their character with honesty as their guide. God does not want us to shame us. He wants us to awaken us. He calls us to hold ourselves accountable, not because He seeks punishment, but because He seeks our growth. A society built on freedom must also be built on responsibility. Without the courage to face our mistakes, freedom becomes an illusion, a hollow idea spoken but never lived. Each individual has a duty to examine their own role in the world they contribute to. Have we spoken when we should have listened? Have we remained silent when justice demanded our voice? Have we allowed fear to guide us when courage was needed? These are the questions that arise when we confront our actions with honesty. God's warning reminds us that pretending we are innocent does not make. Ignoring the truth does not erase it. But facing it, truly facing it, gives us the power to shape a better destiny. When we take responsibility for our actions, we reclaim control over our future. We free ourselves from the chains of guilt, denial, and complacency. We become agents of change, capable of lifting others as we rise. In accepting responsibility, we honor the divine trust placed within us. We show that we are willing to grow, to improve, to step away from the shadows of past decisions and walk toward the light of truth. And when individuals embrace this courage, entire communities transform. A nation becomes stronger when its people choose integrity. Humanity becomes wiser when its people choose accountability. For true freedom is not merely the absence of oppression, it is the presence of moral responsibility in every heart.